I would take a tree that I can get into 100% of the time without spooking anything, but only 80% of the trails come past me. Then something where I have to walk through a bedding area, I can hunt 100% of the trails, but it's highly intrusive.
What is going on? Welcome to the Whitetail Podcast. Steve Hanson is the guest here today. He's one of the most knowledgeable people I know when it comes to CRP, all the nuances to it. And so we talk about what you need to know, the deadline, should you wait to enroll, status of the farm bill, and then we dive into more whitetail content, food plots, stands, October hunting.
Every year I almost shift more and more effort to October. It just seems like anymore, you get a true big one, chances are there's somebody else that knows about it. The earlier you can hunt them, the better, as long as it makes sense.
Hope you guys enjoy this conversation. Here we go. Steve, how you doing?
Hey, doing great, man. How about you?
I'm doing good. Excited to chat here. Always good to catch up. Usually it's when I'm with you for a weekend or something like that. But we have some breaking news in the world of conservation and what trickles down into whitetails and farms. And the breaking news is CRP is open for a little bit longer. What can you tell folks about CRP right now? Because it's open for a short window.
Yeah, it is a short window, and I'm not sure why they made it so short, but you know, our enrollment opened, they announced it, I think the 11th, and then the sign up started on May 12th, and then it goes through June 6th. But I wouldn't plan on walking in on the day of June 6th and starting the process, because it's quite a process to get things going. They've made some tweaks to the system. You know, there is kind of a lot to talk about. This is the 64th CRP sign up. General CRP. So it's kind of crazy. It's been going on that long and there's been that many signups. And this is a general sign up. So, you know, acres that hadn't previously been enrolled or will be eligible as long as they meet cropping history. And then also you can sign up during this period for continuous sign up. So yeah, so there's a lot of project or programs available. You got to kind of know what you're wanting to do and then have a good idea if your land is eligible.
Yeah.
So.
I know there's folks that have been waiting on the sidelines for something like this here, because I know there was a period where people were just waiting to see when they may open it up again.
Yes.
And so a pretty big opportunity. Unfortunately, some people might already have their crops in for some of these fields.
Yeah, and you know they're expecting that. So this contract will begin at the earliest would begin in the next fiscal year for them, which starts October 1st. Most of the applications that I made a start date of November 1st. So in that instance, if it's a 10-year contract, it'll really be a 9-year, 11-month contract. And I just figured that gives the guys that are farming it, you know, an extra month. You're really kind of crowding somebody to expect them to get the crop out of the way by October 1st. Yeah. But November 1st is reasonable for most people. So,
yeah. Real quick, and we've covered this in depth on the Whitetail Master Academy, but just real quick, for folks who are very new to CRP, maybe they have a 5-acre field that has cropping history and they've never gone through the application process. Real quick, what is the difference between general and continuous for CRP?
Well, the general CRP is going to pay about 85% of what your county rental rates are. Your continuous is going to pay 90%. So there's a little bit of a bump there. General CRP is just that. It's kind of general acres that are open for CRP, you know, that you want to enroll in CRP. It's also, there's a cap on those acres of, you know, a nationwide cap. So the process at times can become competitive. And they have a whole system in place of how they rank your farm against other farms, both on dollars and on eligibility to see if you get in. Continuous CRP serves a specific goal. So a lot of them, you know, it may provide pollinator habitat. There's one that we use a lot of around here called heli, which is the only lands that are eligible are highly erodible lands that are currently in crop production or have some type of resource concern. So heli's going to be a really popular one. Another continuous program is SAFE, and that's SAFE goes into a lot of other things. Some of that's geographic areas where they're trying to expand certain cover types to meet a goal. Like, I don't, in Western Iowa, it might be prairie chickens. Here it might be, quail and pheasant nesting habitat, but they're trying to address certain goals. So you could enroll in a safe program there. The other ones that would fall under the continuous a lot of times are the any of the wetland type programs. I think they're usually a CP23 or a CP23A, but those they would fall under that. And there is no specific limit to those. So they can enroll as much of the continuous until they hit the cap. But basically, they'll take all continuous applications ahead of any general. So it's if you really want to get a place into CRP, you need to research what continuous practices are available in your area, and then figure out how you can kind of craft that into what you're wanting to do. A couple things to be careful of: a lot of continuous CRPs do not allow for food plots. So you have to kind of weigh that advantage. If you say, if I enroll this in a general CRP, I'm going to make a little less money, but they're going to allow me up to 10% food plots, versus if we go the other way, where it's like, okay, now I've got to, when I make the application, I've got to exclude my food plot acres, not get paid for those, but net it may still be a better practice. So,
Yeah.
and yeah, these are all reasons that you want to get your application in as soon as possible if you're doing it, because these scenarios may present themselves and you may have to go back and kind of rethink what you're doing. So,
Yeah, well, this is going to go live June 2nd. So if
yeah,
you listen to this the day of, you got to call the
yes.
FSA office, make sure you're eligible.
And you need to break this up into a little reel and get some of it out there right away.
Yeah, we might have to release this front end just a touch early for everyone, because I think it's a great opportunity. Let me ask you this: are you a 10 or 15-year contract guy?
Well, a little bit of both. It depends on what the highest and best use of the land is. In the whole other part that we haven't touched on, is the rates. The rates change. They're not great right now. So that's another reason where, I would probably lean more on some things, lean for a 10 or possibly a 15. Another part of getting back to your continuous versus general question, the continuous, because it does serve a specific need, they have some bonuses involved. There's some rules that they can't pay you more than 50% cost share to establish CRP. So in a continuous sign up, they're going to give you 40% cost share as a bonus. So basically, they're giving you the first 50% as part of every contract. They're giving you the second 50% as a bonus, which gets you up to 90. And then they have something called a SIP payment, which is an acronym for sign up incentive practice. So when you sign up, you get about 33% of your first year payment up front. And it's a bonus on top of your first year payment. So they do all that to try to make sure that these practices are competitive and that the landowner doesn't have to fund a lot of it out of pocket. Initially you will, but you'll get a lot of that money reimbursed. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What, as far as, and I know we've probably talked about this in the past, but do you have a favorite practice? And I'm sure it's farm specific, soil specific, how the field lays out. But is there, just for folks that are, pretty new to this, they've never signed up for CRP, is there like 2 or 3 practices or 1 or 2 practices that you would encourage people to look into?
Yeah, I would say for people that are going to be followers of your podcast and your kind of content, a CP4D is probably going to be the best one. And I think you did some of that on your own farm. And what's nice about that one is it doesn't exactly specify what type of cover types, but you have to have at least 2 different cover types on there. So you could do tall warm season grasses, you could do pollinator, those 2. You could do tall warm season grasses and do trees in an area. It allows for some tree planting. It gives you probably the most flexibility to accomplish your goals. So,
yeah, I think as far as this is a dumb question and it shows that I don't know. But can you do CP4D in general, or is that continuous only?
No, you can do it in general. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I'd always try to do the continuous if I can, because it guarantees I'm going to get in. I just, we just finished a whole bunch of applications, and on the cropland type ones, that was mostly my choice, was a safe to get me into the continuous, and then the practice was a 4D. So,
Mhm.
but
Is there I feel like this is a common debate with a lot of folks and even different, landowners, habitat managers, where there's this break even of I don't even want to mess with CRP. I'll just do it on my own. It's only 10 acres or it's only 5 acres. I'll just do it on my own. I mean, is there like a break even in your mind or what you've seen over the years of, you know, you might make $1,000 a year off the CRP and you wanted to do that project already. So maybe that makes sense. Or option B, you're not really sure what you want to do with that field. Maybe just, tackle it on your own. Where do you fall on that?
usually on the size of the project,
Hmm.
and in that number of acres, is going to vary a lot. If you're dealing with a client that has tons of resources at their disposal, I'm not going to encourage them to go crazy to put a 5 acre contract in place, because we can use, just like we did in the other podcast, you could use equip to get the cover, but not be bound by any of those rules long term.
Yeah.
On the other hand, if this is a guy buying his first 20 or 30 acres, and 5 acres is now one quarter of his farm, that income may be important. In that case, I would recommend using all the stuff available, get some income out of it, get some cost share, just make sure that you do it right so you don't make a mistake that could last 10 or 15 years.
Yeah. There was, when I signed up for my CRP, I was like, man, I get to live in my house for free for like two months out of the year because of the CRP.
Right.
And that was one of my motivations. I was like,
There you go. Yeah.
and
Yeah. In that case, it was important. Yeah.
yeah, it was very important at the time of like crunching the numbers and having, and it's actually been there's a couple things I wish I could do differently, but overall, I would say it's been a positive
Yeah.
decision. But I feel like, yeah, go for folks that are on the fence or need to inquire or learn more about it. Now's the time. And then as far as, man, we've been on a bunch of extensions of the current farm bill. Um, what
Yes.
I mean, obviously, you don't have a crystal ball or a magic wand to know the answer to this, and no one knows the answer definitively. But what is the? I'm sure someone right now, if they're informed enough, they're like, well, I can sign up now, or I can wait for the new farm bill, and maybe uh, there'll be better incentives to wait until the new farm bill comes out.
Yeah, with the way the rate structure is right now, and the changes that were made as this sign up came available, um, I wouldn't look for a whole lot of bright spots with CRP in during this current administration.
Hmm.
They're just historically, they're not the Trump administration doesn't seem to be overly worried about CRP. Now, obviously, there's a lot of stakeholders in this, and everybody's going to have a voice. So, some of that stuff may still go through. But just to give you an idea, what happened during this sign up, and I'm not trying to avoid your question, just trying to answer it with a long um,
You're doing the
answer
weave, the weave.
with an explanation of what's happening. The We were caught off guard by this CRP sign up. When we heard the CRP sign up, I went back through all the farms that we help manage. I think right away I came up with like 7 that I wanted to enroll, and went in, went in. They told me a series of rates. They said, hey, these should come back between, and I won't use a county, so I don't want to screw anybody up, but um, they said these should, these in these 2 counties, we should be looking at 185 on the low end, 240 on the high end. That's what the people in the office said. And I said, okay, I mean, that's going to meet our goals from an income standpoint. Let's go forward with this. And so we did that. Then, and you don't just walk in the office and they give you the rates. You got to make an application, draw on a map exactly what you're applying. First step is they have to check eligibility. So, and I already knew these would qualify because we dealt with these farms for a long time. And then they ended up coming back, and the rates were nowhere even close to 180.
They were way lower.
Way lower.
Oh man.
Way lower. Yeah, and so we were all caught off guard. And what it turned out to be, they were sort of obligated, or they were obligated by the extension of the farm bill to offer a sign up this year. Was in the farm bill to have this sign up at some point. They didn't say when it was going to be, but they were obligated to have it. But because this doesn't seem to be a priority for our current administration, they took away all the incentives that are all the incentives that are tied to soil types. So even though our county average soil rents didn't drop, all these little things that are built in like bumps that keep everything moving forward, they took all those away. The perfect example is I have a farm that I manage for a friend of mine, out of state guy. When he first bought it, the previous owner had turned down almost right at 290 something, $300 an acre. It was going to be wetland CRP. That original owner decided not to do that. My friend bought it. We made an application during a sign up. It's 258, so it had dropped some. We ran that same farm during this application period. It was 199. So it had dropped a third in virtually a 5-year period. So that was one of the offers that we withdrew. We'll keep that into production and try to get it enrolled at some point if it makes sense. But at that number, to see it drop that much, and that's why I don't think during this administration CRP is going to be highly lucrative. And there's a 27 million acre cap nationwide, and I think we're about 1 million or 26. I think we can take on another 1.2 million. I just don't know if they're going to up that cap. So then you're going to be dealing with expiring, re-enrolling. That would be my thing. If I had the ability, as I did during this sign up, to put stuff in and the rates were tolerable for the type of soil and what your goals were, I would put it in. I wouldn't wait on the future thinking it's going to be bright, because it's simple math. If you're not getting good income on the farm or on those acres, and if you wait 2 years, you've lost 2 years income hoping on that much better of an income. So
yeah. Well, I think that paints a pretty, your opinion of the picture of the wait versus do it now if you can do it.
Right.
That's man. It's always a moving target.
It was almost like it was like typically how politics work. They had to have a sign up, but they really didn't want to encourage it. So then they, took away the incentive. Yeah, exactly.
Window.
And, as far as someone that doesn't do a deep dive like this into it, the general public goes, oh, they're trying to sign up 1 million acres. That's great. They're doing their part for conservation and whatever. On the backside, you're going, holy cow. I don't know, you remember you had Alan Ammons on your podcast. He manages a few farms in his retirement still for old clients and stuff. And he had a whole bunch. And, him and I were comparing notes on what some of these came back at, and it was staggering. So, how low some of these were from what areas had been.
Yeah. The one thing I always find interesting how they establish the prices is, what is the air quote cash rent county? What's the county rents cash average? Like, it's based off of survey data. And then this is fresh on my mind because I recorded another land podcast earlier this week, and he was from Missouri, which is a non-disclosure state when it comes to sales. And so they talked about how Missouri just exploded because, the auctions became public and they're like, oh man, this is what people are actually paying. And I almost wonder, it's like if cash rent was a mandatory disclosure, what would really be the county cash rent average? And then what would that inherently do to CRP?
Right. And that is a good point. And, the little deeper part on how they actually calculate those rates, they run the field. So say you have a 40-acre field, they're going to pick out of that field the 3 predominant soil types. And then each county is assigned, each soil type within a county is assigned a rental rate. So then they do a weighted average of those soil types. And that's how they come up with your rental rate.
Okay.
Or that's how they come up with it. How they come up with the rental rate per soil type, that is a survey by NASS, the, national, whatever it is, statistic people that bug you all the time if you don't send it back in. But it is actually pretty important, because I know they have had huge swings in CRP prices in years where they only had 50 respondents to a survey. And so you realize you get that survey in the mail, and the other side of it is I've seen a situation where ag producers, farmers, do not want to see CRP increase. I've heard, now again, you never know if it's true, but
Yeah.
I do believe it is, that they intentionally file it as a lower rental rate because they know that's going to come back to bite them. If they're everything in our county is coming back at $300 rental rate, well, that's where the trend's going to go with the CRP. So if they fudge the numbers a little bit and had enough of their buddies do it, literally in a county area where you only had 50 people respond, it doesn't take too many people to, you know, to sway the numbers.
Yeah,
So
couple trips to the coffee shop, and you
right,
can price
exactly, or
fix that.
co-op or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Wow.
And the other part of it that's unusual is your county supervisors. You know, there's like an FSA county committee. They do have some ability to change the rates.
Mm.
If they see that they're trending too far out of line with neighboring counties, they have, and I don't know the process that they do it, but they do have some ability to change them. So
Man, CRP is just a wormhole. The deeper
it
you
really
dig.
is. It changes every year, and you know, I know that you deal with this kind of stuff, or you know, you're very well versed because of your wife's career and Richard, and there's a lot, as like me, there's a lot of people that I deal with every day that are involved in this stuff, and even they don't know. And one thing that drives me crazy about how they do these CRP signups, they announce the sign up, they tell you it's going to be first come, first serve. Everybody rushes into the office. The people in the office don't know any more than we do because it takes a while to get the training to them. And yeah, and I'm not sure why they do it that way. They must have a reason, but I really wish they would give the people in our offices a week's heads up and a week's worth of training or something, to make sure that the rollout went smoother. But I can see that they're thinking the word's going to get out and so they just must dump it out there for everybody the same day.
Yeah, feed every one of the wolves.
Yeah,
Figure
exactly.
it
Yeah,
out. Oh my
yeah.
gosh. Well, no. Well, I think that's for anyone that's in that boat. Here's some really good information for you to give you a better idea. And like I said, on the Master Academy, we dive into CRP to the deepest level I've ever been able to find anything on the internet. Which you were the point man on that. But what whitetail projects have you been working on here lately, or maybe not working on? I know you had some
No,
equipment issues.
no, we're still working every day. I mean, of course, thankfully we got other stuff, and we're still working going forward. But working on some water holes, that's been cool. Getting a few new water hole spots built.
Mhm.
A lot of, even though I kind of hated to do it, I've been mowing my clover, getting that kind of tuned up, and then most all the plots are planted. Once they're out of the ground, the grain crops, corn and soybeans that are food plots, we start electric fencing the ones that we have to. So we're just doing that right now too. So
What
yeah,
did you change anything with your planning strategy this spring in comparison to previous years, or sticking to what's tried and true?
we didn't change really anything as far as the what we have. If it was going to be corn, it's corn. If it was going to be beans, it's beans. We had a pretty nice spring overall, a little cooler than average, which is unusual. But what I just due to my situation with breakdowns, we ended up no-till planning a lot more than we normally do.
Mm,
Um, and the verdict's still out on how that's going to go. Basically, without an extra big tractor in the mix, it makes tillage that much more difficult. So then you're very reliant on the spraying of your plots and making sure you don't let the weeds get over top of you. And I think we've done a good job of that. So I'm hopeful that we'll get a good stand. So.
What did you use it just for no tilling corn? I feel like that's something that everyone talks about, brings up, and I've never done it. I've been tempted to try it, but did you guys no till corn?
Oh yeah, quite a bit.
Okay.
Yeah. And the couple of the biggest challenges to no-tilling corn is trying to get enough nitrogen into the ground in a way that's stable and going to stay there, because the simplest, cheapest form of nitrogen is going to be urea. And urea, unless it's treated, is really unstable in the heat. It'll evaporate pretty quickly. So you really try to time it ahead of a rain. If you can get that application of that on ahead of a half inch plus rain, that'll take it right into the ground. And you had Mark Foster on the
Yeah.
podcast, and Mark has a Decatur County farm. You were at it with me one day in my Decatur County farm, and we had a 100% chance of rain coming in, and him and I put 800 pounds of urea in the truck and 2 broadcast spreaders, and just right that night, right ahead of the rain, just went out there and got all of our small corn plots, got some urea on it, and it ended up working out perfect. So
Yeah.
that's the biggest challenge with that. And then, having a planter that's set up, a true no-till planter that you can roll through the hard ground. Now, we planted through some this year that were still waist-high beans, and I had never done that before. We didn't brush cut them or anything. We just went right through the beans, that were standing from last year. And so far, so good. I mean, we got a few places where the stand came up a little bit uneven, and I think that was just, it was dry, and we got some of the corn deep enough into the moisture, it came right up. The other stuff came up once we got a rain. So that was, you don't like to see that. Corn does better when it all emerges evenly.
Mhm.
But yeah, I bet we did 10, maybe 12 different plots, no-till corn. So
I
zero
mean,
tillage.
it'll,
So,
yeah. Well, maybe that's the way you do it, and you sell that the big tractor. Say we don't even need it anymore.
well, yeah, there's been some talk of that. It's scary, it just scares you on those big breakdowns. Like one minute everything's going great, and the next minute you're $30,000 into a project that you didn't even see coming. So
Yeah, yeah. I can't even imagine. What's on the short list right now? So this will be June when it's live, and I feel that the summer's a busy time for everyone,
yeah.
across the board, and whitetail projects are still a priority for a lot of folks that are listening to this. So, is there a June punch list of what you're really paying attention to or doing throughout the month of June when it comes to uh, trying to have the best fall ever with what you do in June?
Yeah, I mean, we're getting things ready for our cameras. Anytime we go in and mow food plots, we're mowing our camera spots, camera setups, putting mineral out. If you haven't done that already, you'd probably be late doing that in June, but it can still be done if it's close, close to not close to an area you hunt. I know you guys can't do that in Illinois, right?
No, we can't do anything here in Illinois.
Okay.
Yep.
So, yep. That would be one. Still good time to work on stands. I think you can get in and get that kind of stuff done without spooking everything. The big one for us with the food plots is just making sure everything's sprayed and electric fenced. And then, yeah, just getting ready for cameras. Try to have all our cameras out by the 4th of July and be ready to roll on that stuff. So that would be my kind of punch list for June. June's usually not a super busy month for us.
Hmm.
It's you can still plant switchgrass that time of year if you're behind on something, or it's something you want to make sure you got killed off good. I wouldn't be scared to plant, especially some of the newer switchgrasses this time of year or in June at all. So
Yeah, that's a good point. It is everything always feels like the spring is busy because there's just
it's
so
busy.
much to
Yeah,
get done, and you're so dependent on the weather and the rain, and um,
you got a lot of moving parts.
yeah.
So
So June is a time to button up what you may have missed in April or May. As far as I'm always curious to hear from other people the summer trail camera data that translates to the fall. I mean, we recorded an episode that just went live yesterday with Ryan Glitsky, and he said, like a lot of the deer actually end up staying tight. Now he's in the big woods of Pennsylvania, big unbroken habitat.
right,
He has cameras outside of clear cuts. Okay, that's a 180 from where, not a complete 180, but quite a bit different than a lot of the habitat that is, present in the Midwest. What trends have you seen from? I got this picture of this giant buck in velvet in July. And then, like, is there any characteristics or times that you see disappears completely for the rest of the year, does stick around the entire year? Like, if you had to break down the different percentages of, here's this big buck that I got on an alfalfa field in July, and he still seems to be hanging around this area versus got him in July on an alfalfa field, August, September, he disappeared and, he got shot 4 miles away. Like,
sure,
what are some rules of thumb? Because guys either really overly optimistic for their season in the summer or
right,
overly pessimistic about their season, and then usually they flip flop when it comes
right,
fall.
yep. And one thing I would say with with those deer disappearing or the ability to stay on the deer, that a lot of that's going to be a function of the size of the property or the amount of access that you have in an area. You
Yeah.
know, if you have 40 acres, I would just want to know that there's a buck of that caliber alive. You know, if he's used your place in the past, that's that's ideal. You know, then he's going to be. I would assume he's going to be back unless there's some kind of conditions that don't, warrant that. On a bigger property, or and what I'm mainly trying to do, I'm trying to figure out what deer from last year survived. It's usually very easy to do if you have enough access. We're allowed to put corn or mineral, whatever, by cameras way outside of the hunting season. And the month of July, even into August, basically what you want to do is, if you're going to try to use corn, and I'm speaking to Iowa because that's only, pretty much the only place I whitetail hunt, would be, I want to be able to find those deer on soybean fields, but use corn to
To
get
get
them
them
to
in
come
first.
in before the fields make corn. So once you get into like early August, you have a couple things happen. You start to get acorns dropping, which changes the food source and their locations, and you get the corn actually makes enough corn. Once it forms ears, they'll just start eating it out of the field, and you cannot concentrate them or find them near as easily as you can. I'd say the 15th of July till the 15th of August would probably be the best time to just either scout to find a big one or try to keep tabs on one that you knew you had from before. So,
Yeah. What about, do you put much emphasis on camera intel in the month of June? I admittedly, I have some cameras out right now. It's like, I mean, he looks like he might be all right, but it's
right.
like you just have no
It's,
clue.
I would call it somewhat entertainment unless,
Yeah.
unless a real specific deer, with, it has a torn ear, has a double throat patch. If there was something like that, I would say, it might be worth doing that. I keep about 10 cameras out year round, just on the different farms, kind of, it's fun for turkey season to see strutters and stuff. And it's just good to, like on a food plot, oh, that spray killed, this place is stone dead, or no, it's not dead. What do we got to do? Save you a trip back out there. The, like one of the things that helped me out this year, um, I had a big fire on my Decatur County farm that we didn't light. It actually was lit by a neighbor to the south or someone to the south, and burned, maybe 100 acres on my place. Burned I don't know, 40 or something of the neighbor to the south and another 20 to the north. But we knew that because of the cameras. It's
Yeah.
something, and you'd be able to answer this better, but that camera will pick up a fire further away than any other kind of movement. And I don't know why that is. Like,
It's a change in ambient radiation, so it must be
well, that's
putting out
probably
a bunch of
exactly
it.
what it is.
Yeah.
Yep. But yeah, so no, I like keeping the cameras out for that, but I wouldn't, you know, we can't put them all out in one day. So if we start putting them out, the 20th of June, and we get them all out by the 4th of July, we consider that a win.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, but I don't put a lot, to answer your question directly, I don't put a lot of stock in June photos. It's just more for fun or just to be set up for later in the month. So,
Yeah. I think that um, makes a lot of sense. But man, it's like you get the itch, and so
oh
it's like
yeah,
you got to
everybody
have
does.
some out.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Especially when there's target bucks that you really want to see if they made it or not.
Yeah.
That's what gets me. It's like, okay, we know this one's going to be at least 6. Did he make it? We found the sheds, everything.
Yeah.
It's like finally putting that piece together. And the other advantage to getting your cameras going are on the early side. Like for us, our fall or our green food plots that'll come in late July and August, we can use that first round of camera data to tweak those plots. That's a huge thing to me, is like, if one is in this, okay, he's in this block of woods or in the same place he was last year, we know he's going to be in this same place this coming fall. So um yeah, which is nice. I mean, it gives the ability to kind of double down on your efforts on certain farms to make sure you're set up for them.
Yeah.
So
I'm so when this is going live, the following day, if all goes well, we'll be interviewing Bobby Warthington. So I've been reading his book. I was reading
oh,
his book
cool.
yesterday, and I came across something that was about identifying funnels and finding, he looks at it as a mathematical equation. Like the more trails that intersect in one spot,
Sure.
is it exponentially increases your odds. And I'm thinking of a spot that we broke down on the Master Academy where you tracked with Onyx, where you walked all the different deer trails and then you
Right.
found like the point of intersection. And I thought of you when I was reading that.
Yep.
And I think that's something important to bring up for setting up tree stands in June, because I feel a lot of people, I don't want to do a sweeping statement. Most people are procrastinators. They uh, they wait to the last minute. They end up hanging a lot of their stands in September or like very late August, and they're trying to get everything
Right.
done at once. And in Bobby's book, he says people rush it. This spot's good, it's good enough. And his whole thing is like finding the exact ambush point. And so, what advice do you have for getting ahead of the game in the month of June to maybe recall some information from the year before, if you had experience there the year before, and how do you, in your opinion, really find the best of the best, like the spot within the spot, the best spot available on that particular parcel for fall?
You know what that's going to come down to, and it is something you can work on during June. Um, it's what's the best of the best spot, but still has the best access. That's how
Yeah,
I would take a trail that I can get it, or a tree that I can get into 100% of the time without spooking anything, but only 80% of the trails come past me,
mhm,
than something where I have to walk through a bedding area. I can hunt 100% of the trails, but it's highly intrusive. So that's the balancing act that I want. And I do think June is still early enough. If you have that stand picked out, even if you already have the stand there, just spend an hour or two walking in with snippers, loppers, or a handsaw or something. You probably don't want to be in there just wildly chainsawing. I guess you could, because they're going to leave and come back, but go in and then make sure that your access is rock solid. That would be probably the biggest thing. If you already know that location and you're not talking about moving a stand or something, I would really dial in that access. Like if there's a lower place on the terrain where you might have to cut a few limbs to get through, but you can stay totally concealed, or just even adding a secondary entrance for a different wind direction. If
yeah,
the stand works on multiple winds, your access may not work on multiple winds. Just try to make it when you go in to hunt that spot, you're truly giving it your best chance you can. So, and that would be another thing. You can still do that in June.
mhm.
Ideally you would have that data of those trails on Onyx from wintertime scouting. That to me is huge. So,
It is, because as soon as you start relying on memories when you get in trouble, and it's
right,
like when
right.
you're walking, you're like, oh, I'll remember that, and you forget.
Yep. Yep. And even if you walk, you're shed hunting or something, you walk by a good tree, just mark it as a possible stand, you
Yep.
know, that time of year. And then this is the time of year to come back and say, hey, even if I don't want to put a whole set in here, put a set of sticks in here, prune it out for a saddle hunt, something like that. But
Yeah.
just give yourself that little bit of edge, a clean path to enter, and, you know, a plan of which tree, which direction am I going to set up? Because you never know when you're going to say, oh, I get this is my third day in a row of a northeast wind. I really need something different, but I want to be on that same buck. So it's good to have those kind of options. And I still don't think you're too late at all to get in there and do that. So,
Yeah. Yeah, it's better to do it in June than late August or
yeah,
September or October.
absolutely. Yeah, yeah. As long as they have velvet on, they're going to be on one pattern. As soon as they shed that velvet, that's when you definitely got to start leaving them alone and making sure you don't make. That's when it's zero mistake time. So.
Yeah. What are you looking forward to most this upcoming season?
Getting to hunt that big farm of mine. I finally got one, at least one, if not two bucks there that are going to be 6, 7. Truly having multiple true shooters to hunt. I
Mhm.
think that's probably the biggest thing that I'm looking forward to on that place. And that farm is progressing along, quite nicely with a lot of the work that's been done over the years. So it's actually getting to be the really fun part of hunting it, because the hard work on a lot of that's been done. Yeah, it'll be good for you to see that. Even
Yeah.
even some of the same areas where we went in last year when we did some filming,
Mhm.
to see that those clover CRP fire breaks adjacent to my corn food plots. I mean, it looks like it's supposed to right now. So
That's great.
Yeah, so hopefully we'll get to see that soon. So
Are you going to kill them in October?
yes,
I'm putting
absolutely.
you think you're going to kill the buck
Yeah.
on October?
Yeah, more than likely. Yeah, I'm going to put, every year I almost shift more and more effort to October. And that's always been my strong time of year, has been October, but it just seems like anymore. And it's probably just a sign of the times. But if you get a true big one, chances are there's somebody else that knows about it. The earlier you can hunt them, the better, as long as it makes sense. And that's where, having these key, like little green food plots, water holes, stuff like that, gives us that opportunity. So,
Well, in your opinion, what is the perfect formula for early October? So, uh, the hunting site location, standard blind. We'll go through each one. I'm going to grill you with all these questions. So,
sure.
we're
Yeah.
going to paint the best opportunity of a deer, and you have enough time now to tweak it to try to optimize this mousetrap for early October. So, do you prefer to hunt out of a stand or a blind? And this is not encompassing early muzzleloader. So, I'm focusing on archery equipment because Iowa is unique to that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's unusual. Um, Most of the time I'd set it up for a tree stand.
Hmm.
I'm not, I don't know why, but I'm not a big archery hunter out of blinds. I can do it like anybody can, but it's not my thing. It just, it just isn't. So in that being said, having that set up, unfortunately, everybody likes to think that you set everything up for a north wind because you're going to hunt them on the cold fronts and stuff, and we just don't get that many. you know every place we have where we have a big deer, we're going to have a north wind setup that's going to be like the ultimate setup. But yeah, a lot of times you'll have those same deer start showing up daylight on 80-degree days, and having a way to hunt them on those kind of wind directions. And that's usually where our water hole setups come in, because with a water hole, they're coming there for water as much as food. And the south wind usually brings warm weather that kind of encourages that. So I
Hmm.
would say, you know, a small grain plot, or I mean, a small green plot adjacent, very close to good bedding cover. That's key because they're not going to move far. And
Like
then
100 yards away, 200 yards away.
within 200, 250 yards, I would say two 250 would be ideal. Within 250 yards, that would be, in my mind, that would be perfect. And then just a good, safe, just a really rock solid entrance and exit plan of how to get in and out of there. You know, Ideally, maybe some grain close by. you know, that's always nice because it just tends to keep them on that part of the property. Most of our setups always had that mixed in with it. But yeah, that would be my key. And again, if I could paint the perfect picture, it would be have a bedding area and this food plot also adjacent to mass producing oak trees, because they're going to gravitate towards those at a lot of that time. And that's where you don't want to try to pull them a half mile from a oak flat where they're bedded, or beautiful white oak timber. You're better off being right on the edge of that where they want to travel to
Mhm.
anyways. But have the ability to do it in the daylight for sure. So
And do you think, in your opinion, the type of, you know, we have grain, so we have basically corn and soybeans. Throw sorghum in there if you wanted to, and then
yeah.
for greens, people think of, like a fall blend. People think of clovers. What do you think is the does it really? Let me. Do you think as long as it's green and lush, do you think it truly matters what type of green food source for early fall? I mean,
Not no, not exactly. I would say as long as it's green, lush, and it's been, well maintained, it's fertilized. You want to make that plot kind of the crown jewel of their food source, almost like the ice cream or the icing on the cake. My farm, it is another good problem to have, or that farm that I have. We did tons of clover fire breaks that have now finally come into their own. So we can't compete with ourselves with clover, because there's so much good clover on my farm. The purpose of that
miles,
is to
probably
keep them,
miles of
yeah,
clover.
literally miles. There's like 7 miles of it. And if so, I won't, my kill plots won't be clover. In that instance, if this is something I'm planning on hunting in October, it's probably going to be a combination of like oats, radishes, and Austrian winter peas, or any kind of field pea.
Mhm.
Those three things together kind of are something, And you could substitute the field peas for even soybeans. Just late plant some soybeans so they get up 2 or 3 inches. You know, you're just trying to provide that new tender growth in that lush green that they can't find anywhere else. That's what I'm trying to do. I I kind of like that combination because it tends to frost kill because these are not spots that I'm going to hunt late muzzleloader.
Mhm.
So I'd rather not concentrate their efforts there and move right onto our grain true grain food plots. That's one thing I like about that. Turnips are good too, but turnips will become a food source at other times of the year. So you have to watch that. If you're going to be sitting on a place where you can't shoot those little plots, you don't want your target buck late season hanging up there and not moving on. Now we're lucky we have a big farm where we can craft all these things into one spot. But if I was going to put together a plot to hunt specifically in October, it would be some combination of oats, radishes, and Austrian winter peas. It would be probably those three things. So, and planted later, I'm going to say Labor Day weekend would probably be about the ideal timing, and planted heavier rates than most people would think. Because what I tell people, I don't want big tall growth. I want tons of little plants.
A carpet.
You know,
Yeah.
yeah, carpet. Yeah, I call it a chia pet.
Yeah,
So,
that works too.
yeah, well, that's literally what I call my chia plot. So,
Yeah. Yeah. What do you think's the most overrated food source in your opinion?
um, I don't know. They kind of all have their place.
They do.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, everything's different. I would say instead of calling it overrated, maybe just misused. You hunting them at the wrong time of year, and a simple one for that would be soybeans. They're going to have a very limited amount of use early in the year, and then a lot of use late in the year. Um, yeah, I would say soybeans are the most misused because I know a lot of guys that are mid-October sitting over a browned over soybean plot, and that's definitely not the place to be,
Yeah.
But um, yeah, I can't really pick one that would be the most misused because every thing is so specific to um, to that, to whatever the situation um, and the farm has to offer. So.
What do you think is the most underrated then?
I mean, I don't know that it's underrated, but I don't think people understand the power of corn.
Mm.
Standing corn, and again, this is an Iowa thing, but we have the ability to mow corn. That is a legal way to hunt. And that's probably the most, if you want to move deer to an exact spot, that's probably the best way to do it. So,
Yeah.
yeah, people say, oh, there's corn everywhere. Well, there's not mowed corn everywhere October 28th. You know what I mean? Yeah, I would say, corn is it's got to be done right, because it takes a lot to grow good corn. And a half-acre corn plot in the timber is probably not going to get anywhere. You got to kind of have ag equipment to plant and manage that. So it's kind of a higher level. The other food plot that I would say I hear a lot of interest about, and I'm not a big fan of, unless you're in really specific situations, is alfalfa.
Mm.
I have more and more people this year. Hey, I want to plant some alfalfa and stuff. And so I'm like, we got to dig a little deeper. Like, do you have soil tests? Do you know exactly what your pH is? Are the weeds totally killed, or was this cropland before? And the biggest question, how are you going to manage it? Because the only successful alfalfa stuff I've ever been involved in was managed as hay part of the year, where it was baled. And that's why people are attracted to it. They see the farmer's field, when it's knee high right before second cutting and it's lush and beautiful, and they don't realize if that wouldn't have been mowed, it would start to turn, it's going to get coarse unless you have a ability to mow it a lot yourself with some kind of mower that's going to chop it up really fine. I don't know that I would do alfalfa.
Hmm.
So
I planted a sorghum this year because I just
okay.
wanted to see. And so, do you have any experience with that? I don't
Oh
even
yeah.
know. Okay, so what can I expect with sorghum? And ironically, there's been yeah, just talking to people like, oh yeah, I planted sorghum this year. I don't know why everyone's planting sorghum now. I fell into um, that buzz myself, and I don't have a ton of expectations. It's popping out of the ground, starting to grow, but
When did you plant it?
I planted it probably like May 19th, so it might be a touch early.
Okay, yeah, that's in a normal year. That'd be the right time. I always think anything after the 15th of May. What would you do for weed control?
Most of it was in beans last year. Sprayed it all down. And so it's pretty clean. And if anything comes up, it should be broadleaf, so it should be able to treat with 2,4-D.
Okay. Yeah. Um, that's been my experience is if you, the failures I've seen usually involve weed control, especially foxtail. That's a tricky one, because it's a grass trying to compete with a grass. The and part of your usage of by the deer, what I anticipate you'll see is depending if it's a light topped grain or a dark topped, the actual grain when it grows, the lighter the grain, the quicker they're going to utilize it. The darker the grain, it has more tannin in it, and that has to leach out before it comes super palatable. Usually they start eating all of it around, I'm going to say around first killing frost. So I'm going to say your area probably mid-October, maybe a little later than that in some year. But I've never seen something that they don't seem to mess with it, and then when it turns, whatever it does, they eat it all.
Yeah.
They'll eat it till it's gone. But it does a great job of not requiring an electric fence. When they don't want to mess with it, they don't mess with it. So
that was
it
my
is
biggest
good for that.
motivation. That
Yep.
honestly, that was my biggest motivation. I was going to plant corn. I was like, man, I don't want to. The way the field's shaped and it's kind of chopped up into two different fields. Like, I don't want to have to fence off two different. It would just be the weirdest looking fence all the way around it, and
Right.
it would have been a pain. So like, I'll try sorghum and see if it's overhyped, underhyped, or what my experience of it is.
Yeah. No, I think you'll do well with it. How did you broadcast plant it, or what'd you do?
I no-tilled it.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Yeah, no-till
Yeah.
drilled it.
Yep. Yeah. I actually have sorghum plates. I have sorghum plates for my little 7,000 planter,
Mm-hmm.
and I can plant it. I can row plant it or plant it with my drill, and I've done great with both. The other time we utilize is if we have some major failure. One thing you can do, or you probably could have done, depending on your seed source, is you can spray it with some corn chemicals. Like it is it will push through atrazine. So that's another, weed management strategy would be to, plant it like you would corn and then immediately spray it with some type of pre-emergent like an atrazine and go forward that way. And when we've used it is when we've had failures in a cornfield due to whatever, and the fertilizer's on, the chemicals on, we'll come right back and drill it even in, late June or something and still get a good stand. So, yeah, but I think you'll be happy with it. I would definitely give it some nitrogen if you haven't done that.
Okay.
It likes nitrogen. It's not quite as hungry as a corn crop, but you're probably whatever the farmers would do in your area for corn, I would give it about half that. So if they're doing 150 pounds of nitrogen on the corn, try to give your sorghum maybe 75. So, and maybe wait till it shades the ground so that if there are some up and coming weeds, you don't just encourage them to try to outcompete you. So
yeah, that's good advice. Well, I'm first time ever planted it, so
cool.
I'll keep everyone posted here.
Yeah, send me some pictures.
Yeah, I will. Is there anything else you can think of as far as what's in the pipeline and anything else that you feel is an easy pitfall to fall into for the upcoming season?
No, just like I said, try to make sure if you got food plots of any kind, you keep an eye on the weeds because stuff grows so fast this time of year that you think, oh, I sprayed that 3 weeks ago. Well, go check it and make sure, because weeds are easy to kill when they're little, and that every inch they get taller, they get much tougher until they get to beer can size, and then they're very tough. So, I would say staying on the spraying and then just be ready for your getting your cameras out. Those are the two main things. So
yeah. Well, I'm excited. I'm counting down October for you to see. You've spoken into existence now, so hopefully when it works out, we'll loop back to this and we can talk about how the plan worked. And it's always good when you feel confident with the plan, you have some intel, and you develop a plan for a specific deer. I feel like that is such a huge leg up going into a season versus trying to find one, trying to figure out on the fly. I mean, it's just a huge advantage.
Right. Yeah, that is something we're very fortunate for. And that's the nice thing of having a same farm for a couple of years is just, using some of the data we learned last year for this year. When did he show up on this side of the farm? When was he on this side of the farm? Obviously, there's changes due to crops, but most of that, we can work around for sure. So
let me ask you this: would you rather have a 640, big old farm, or 1640s. And your
640.
goal is to shoot a big deer, like big deer.
640 for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, without a doubt. Yeah. Yeah. Now, if and I know we always talk about this, and I've heard you interview other people. I mean, part of that is due to just, again, Iowa, and it's changing. It's just, in my opinion, to consistently hunt super high-end deer in Iowa, you sort of have to be in charge of them. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
You could get, everybody's going to get a chance to hunt the odd big one on a 40 here or there, but to consistently have big deer, it's kind of, you almost have to make it your responsibility and try to pass those ones. And that's really changed in the last 10 years. So.
Yeah. I mean, that's a fair point. So 10 or 15 years ago, what would have been your answer?
I would have said the
10 or 16.
1640s.
Yeah.
Yeah, the 1640s for sure, because then it's just like, you got to do your part. And I would say that's about when we made the switch. A lot of those big deer that I killed in that time frame, I mean, it was just find them and hunt them and get them. Now it's like you kind of have to put the whole thing together habitat wise and hopefully you can make it happen for yourself. So
yeah. Do you I don't know if I said on the podcast before, I know I brought it up. I look at like, for everyone has different goals when it comes to whitetail hunting. Like
sure.
you've been hunting forever. So what is going to get you excited is, a lot different than what it was when you were 20 years old. And so I feel like sometimes when people hear that, they're like, oh man, it must be nice, that, you have the opportunity to, to be so selective and hunt. But do you think there'll be an evolution to where, for the guys that really, really want high-end deer, but maybe they don't have the ability to acquire, a large tract of land? Do you see a model similar to duck clubs as whitetail clubs being a realistic thing? And the reason I think it could, but then the reason why I don't think it'll work is a duck is a duck. There's
Right.
probably one massive deer, and there's 4 or 5 diehard members that spend a bunch of money to be part of, this club or buy, shares in an LLC.
Yeah, I mean, I think that'll be definitely a sort of general trend that you start to see, because you'll have like-minded people that just say, hey, I can't swing owning 500 acres by myself, but if 4 of us or 6 of us, whatever, go together and lease this, come up with some common, rules that we're going to live by, and a fair way to sort of allocate a chance at that resource. I absolutely think that's a good strategy going forward. It just, like anything, it just takes a lot of people, willing to do the right thing. But you're exactly correct. Your biggest challenge is going to be how many high-end deer are there likely to be, and how does each member get good access to that? So
yeah. In theory, it sounds like a good idea, but actually applying it, I feel like you'd have to have a really special group of members for that.
Yes.
But I bet you 20, 30 years from now, it'll be a lot more common than what it is
Oh,
now.
yeah, I could see that for sure. So
yeah. Awesome.
Well,
always a pleasure to catch up and chat. Where can people follow along with what you have going on? If if they have any sorghum questions or anything else, they can reach out to you.
Yeah, reach out to me on either just send me a message on Instagram, or that'll connect over to my Facebook, and it's just Steve Hanson III. So I'm pretty easy to find there, and you can see all kinds of stuff we got going on. So
broken tractors, planting, everything else.
Yeah, stuck stuff, broken stuff, whatever.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you so much, Steve. I really appreciate it, and I look forward to staying in touch, following along on your October. I'm October, every cold front, or even warm front for that matter, I'm going to be thinking of you.
Yep. I'm setting it up so I can hunt the warm fronts too. So.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
All right. Have a good day, man. So
there you guys have it. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Always great to chat with Steve. And like I said, we're in Tennessee right now, and we may have some podcasts. Just keep an eye out for some Tennessee content, some Alabama content, some more whitetail cribs. So I hope you guys have a great rest of your week. If you enjoyed the episode, it'd mean a lot if you left a review if you haven't done so, or if you've already left a review in the past, it'd be great if you refreshed it. And that is it. We'll see you next time.